Professor Bree loved cheese. It wasn't just a casual fondness, it was a deep, passionate love. He would savor every bite, letting the creamy texture melt in his mouth. Brie, cheddar, Gouda, you name it, he adored them all. His house was filled with cheese of every kind, and he even had a special cheese cellar where he aged his own creations. He ate cheese every day. Morning, noon and night, cheese was a staple in his diet. His friends often joked that he would turn into a block of cheese one day. But Professor Bree didn't mind. He embraced his cheesy lifestyle with pride. One day, Professor Bree was looking at the moon through his telescope. He had always been fascinated by the night sky, often spending hours gazing at the stars and planets, but this night was different. "That's funny," he said, squinting through the lens. "The moon looks like a big ball of cheese." He couldn't believe his eyes. The craters and shadows formed patterns that resembled the texture of his favorite cheddar. Was it just his imagination, or was there something more to this celestial body? Professor Bree grabbed his cheese-powered super telescope. This was no ordinary telescope. It was a special invention of his own, designed to magnify objects with incredible clarity. He looked closer, adjusting the focus to get a better view. "It is cheese!" he cried. His heart raced with excitement. The moon wasn't just a rock in the sky. It was a giant floating ball of cheddar cheese. He could hardly contain his joy. "The moon is made of giant cheddar," he repeated to himself over and over. It was the most incredible discovery of his life. He had to share this with the world. Professor Bree raced to tell the world his cheesy discovery. He ran through the streets, shouting at the top of his lungs. People stared at him, puzzled by his frantic behavior. Everyone thought he was silly. They laughed and shook their heads. The idea of the moon being made of cheese was too absurd to take seriously. "The moon made of cheese?" They laughed. It was a joke to them. A whimsical fantasy that belonged in children's stories, not in the realm of scientific discovery. But Professor Bree knew the truth. He was determined to prove his discovery no matter how much ridicule he faced. He began to gather evidence, taking detailed notes and photographs through his super telescope. He had to warn everyone. If the moon was indeed made of cheese, it could have significant implications. What if someone tried to harvest it? The balance of nature could be disrupted. The moon was a delicious, cheesy treat, and someone might try to eat it. Professor Bree couldn't let that happen. He continued his research, hoping to find a way to protect the moon and its cheesy goodness for future generations. Astronauts flew to the moon in a rocket ship. They wanted to be the first people to walk on the cheese moon. The astronauts landed on the moon. They opened the spaceship door.
Wow, it's cheese, and it's even smellier up close.
The astronauts took giant, cheesy steps. They bounced on the moon like it was a giant trampoline made of cheese. One astronaut even took a bite.
Cheddar, but a little bit too sharp for me.
Back on Earth, things were getting cheesy. Chunks of cheese started falling from the sky.
Cheese storms, run for cover!
Some people built houses out of cheese. Others made clothes out of cheese. Everyone was going crazy for cheese. There were cheese factories everywhere, turning the moon's cheese into all sorts of crazy things. Cheese-powered cars, cheese-flavored bubble bath, you name it, they cheesed it. But not everyone loved cheese. While many people adored its creamy texture and rich flavors, there were those who couldn't stand the sight or smell of it. For some, cheese was a delightful treat, but for others, it was a nightmare on a plate. Dr. Havarti was a very picky eater, and he hated cheese. He couldn't understand why anyone would willingly eat something so pungent and, in his opinion, revolting. The mere thought of cheese made his stomach churn. He thought it was stinky and gross. The smell alone was enough to send him running in the opposite direction. He often wondered how something so foul could be so beloved by so many.
"I have a plan," Dr. Havarti declared with a glint in his eye. He had spent countless nights devising a scheme that would rid the world of cheese once and for all.
Dr. Havarti cackled. His laughter echoed through his secret laboratory. Filled with strange contraptions and bubbling potions, he was convinced that his plan was foolproof. He built a giant vacuum cleaner. This wasn't just any vacuum cleaner, it was a colossal machine designed to suck up every last bit of cheese from the moon. Yes, the moon! Dr. Havarti believed that the moon was made of cheese, and he was determined to get rid of it.
"I will suck up all the cheese from the moon," he shouted with glee. His eyes sparkled with excitement as he imagined a world free of cheese. "Then everyone will have to eat broccoli and Brussels sprouts just like me." Dr. Havarti was convinced that his dietary preferences were superior, and he wanted everyone to share in his love for green vegetables.
Dr. Havarti pointed his vacuum cleaner at the moon. He had spent years perfecting his invention, and now it was time to put it to the test. He aimed carefully, making sure that his machine was aligned perfectly with the lunar surface, and pressed the on button. Zap! The vacuum cleaner roared to life. The ground shook as the powerful machine began its work. Dr. Havarti watched in anticipation, hoping that his dream of a cheese-free world would soon become a reality. Professor Bree saw Dr. Havarti's cheese-stealing vacuum cleaner. Professor Bree knew he had to stop Dr. Havarti, but how? Just then, Professor Bree's tummy rumbled. He had an idea. S1. Media group, person having a sudden idea with a light bulb moment, person with an excited expression, person exclaiming Eureka. Stock, distribute, equally. Oh no, he's going to eat all the cheese himself.
I'll challenge Dr. Havarti to a cheese-eating contest. He can't resist a challenge, especially if it involves getting rid of cheese.
Dr. Havarti couldn't believe his ears. A cheese-eating contest? This was his dream come true. He landed his vacuum cleaner on Earth and hopped out.
Prepare to lose, Bree.
Dr. Havarti scoffed. They started gobbling down cheese. Cheddar, mozzarella, even stinky blue cheese. They ate it all. But something strange started happening. With every bite, the moon got smaller. Dr. Havarti ate the last bite of his meal, savoring the flavors as if it were his last. Little did he know, this simple act would set off a chain of events that would change the fate of the Earth forever.
I win, he exclaimed, unaware of the cosmic consequences that were about to unfold. The joy of victory was short-lived.
He burped loudly, patting his stomach in satisfaction, but as he did, everyone around him stared in horror. The moon, a constant companion in the night sky, had vanished without a trace. The Earth started acting funny, wobbling in its orbit like a top about to fall. Without the moon's gravitational pull, the planet was losing its balance. With no moon to hold it in place, Earth was getting pulled closer and closer to the sun. The heat was becoming unbearable and the days grew shorter as the planet spiraled inward.
We ate too much cheese, they cried, realizing their gluttony had unforeseen consequences. The excessive consumption had somehow triggered this cosmic catastrophe. Now Earth is turning into a giant grilled cheese sandwich. The planet's surface bubbled and melted, transforming into a gooey, cheesy mess.
Could Professor Bree and Dr. Havarti work together to save the Earth? The two brilliant minds raced against time, concocting a plan to restore balance and reverse the cheesy transformation. Or would everyone turn into cheesy toast? The stakes had never been higher. The fate of humanity hung in the balance. The end?